So I forgot to mention earlier how my good friend Pat Rooney, I see he endorsed your candidacy.
He did. Pat and I have been friends for a long time, almost since the first day I moved here to Palm Beach County about 19 years ago. And we've served together on the REC. And it's a great family. And I was thrilled that Pat became my first endorsement.
So we could plan on having some events at Rooney's public house, is it?
We've had one already.
Oh, okay.
Back in September, but
Excellent.
we probably will have some more. It's a long campaign, so there's plenty of opportunity.
Had a while. Your election, you said, is in August.
That's right, the end of August.
And that's the primary.
The primary, right. And then the general election is, of course, the same day as the presidential election in November.
Excellent. So let's talk about term limits. This is one of my favorite, and of course, your candidacy is can thank the fact that we now have term limits, because probably but for term limits, Commissioner Marcus and Commissioner Aronson would not be leaving the county commission.
Probably true. Yeah.
I think we can bet it would be a safe bet on that.
Okay, I'll concede that.
So term limits. What are your feelings on that? Do you support them?
Well, I think there's an organization here that. Well, actually, the organization isn't here, but the president of U.S. Term Limits, I don't know if you've ever met him, Phil Blumel. Right.
I've had him on the show,
but
of course.
But they've got statistics showing that every time term limits is put up to a vote, it's overwhelmingly passed by the voters.
And it was pretty shocking, because the Voters Coalition this week, the League of Women Voters came in and they were talking about how they were so opposed to term limits and it forces good people out of office. Well, the same way it forces good people out of office, I completely disagree with them on that. It also forces the bad people out of office as well. Yeah, right. And the good thing about running for office, for people who want to be career politicians, is you can be on the city council, you could be on an improvement district, you could run for the county commission, you could run for the state house, the state senate. There's so many other positions that you could run for without getting entrenched in like a county commission seat. And a lot of people had criticized that or the lack of term limits in Palm Beach County, and said that they thought that had there been term limits, that a lot of these honest fraud convictions on the Palm Beach County that occurred would not have occurred had term limits been in effect and the politicians been out. Now we have counties like Miami-Dade County where they don't have term limits, and they stand there forever.
Well, I go back to, again...
You talked about Commissioner Marcus, 28 years. I mean, that's really too long to be in office, 20 years. And the same thing with the school board. We had those people in there. I mean, they were, they'll stay there until they go to their grave, if they could.
Well, I go back, again, to the Constitution and, sort of the intent of the Constitution. And although that's a federal document, I think the basis on which this country was founded extends down to people running for the city council or the founders didn't intend for people to be career politicians. They intended. I mean,
we could still have a monarchy for that matter, right?
Yeah.
Go back to England and have the king and queen, and they'll be there for life, and then their sons and daughters will be the successors.
And I think
that's how some politicians would like it to be.
Yeah. I think, people predict a disaster when the legislature went to term limits in the early 90s, and I don't think it's been a disaster. I think they're doing a very good job. So
I agree.
I think the criticism is ill-founded, and I think everybody should have obviously the power of incumbency prevents a lot of people from ever running.
Right.
And they're just afraid to challenge an incumbent, and they probably should be. I mean, it's very difficult to unseat an incumbent unless they're caught, absolutely doing something wrong or indicted or...
You have the same problem with judges.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they haven't done anything about the judges, because... there's so many attorneys out there, and we don't need the judges who are there, because typically what happens is... in these jobs with most politicians and judges, what you see is they don't get better after time. These are not jobs where you're learning more
Mm-hmm. Right.
As an attorney, you're practicing, you're doing things, you are getting better over time, the same way, but there are a lot of times when these judges, they're on the bench, other than just simply practicing law and doing your trade, where you would hope that you are improving over time. They're just not improving, and a lot of them just kind of seem to regress. The same thing with a lot of politicians. They regress into and get entrenched into things that they have strong beliefs in and biases, and it just gets worse over time, not better.
Well, I always think bringing fresh perspectives into a situation undoubtedly helps. I mean, experience is clearly important in many, many things and shouldn't be undervalued, but taking a fresh look at things after a few years is also, I think, very rejuvenating for government and for our democracy, and it's what I think the founders intended.
Ethics. That's a big issue here in Palm Beach County, and we now have the Inspector General and the Ethics Commission. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me say I think it's something that we had to do and should have done, because it just to repair our own reputation, as you mentioned before. 3 sitting commissioners and 2 West Palm Beach city commissioners served jail time, and a 4th had to resign under sort of threat of indictment, I guess. So I think if we had done nothing about it, it would have further. I mean, our reputation was damaged enough by all that happening.
Right.
I think if we hadn't responded, the reputation wouldn't have come back.
And now there can't be so much criticism against Miami-Dade, because they say, well, look at you there in Palm Beach County.
Right. I did notice in the paper this morning that a bunch of cities are suing about the funding mechanism for the ethics or the Inspector General. And
they don't want to pay, basically.
Well, I think the original deal was that was going to be funded by either a fee on contracts with the county or contracts with the city, and I think they've changed the funding mechanism around, and every city is in a budget problem now,
right.
And to put that additional burden on them, I'm not sure I agree with. I'm not that familiar with the case, but I can understand why they're a little unhappy about being asked to shoulder the burden of
another
some
fee.
more. Right, exactly. But having said that, though, let me just talk about my experience in public office. I find that 99.9% of the people that I've run across who've served in office and been elected are certainly not in it to enrich themselves, to do business deals. They're really trying to do something better for their community. I might disagree with the way they want to do it, and in fact, I have plenty of policy disagreements with people on my city council in the Gardens and with some people on the improvement district, but I find that by and large we shouldn't be too cynical about people that put themselves out there and run for office, because I think most of them are really trying to do a good job and are not trying to benefit themselves by being in office.
What about pressure to help out your friends? Is there always that pressure there when you're dealing on, when you're have friends come before you, or acquaintances or friends of friends on the city council or the county commission?
That's a good question. I think if they know you, I can only speak about my own experience. I mean, people know that I was going to call them like I saw them. I was hopefully 100% fair in every vote that I ever took and every decision I ever made. And people are allowed to advocate. Certainly that's also in the Constitution. And people come and advocate, and whether they're friends or strangers, doesn't really matter. I listen to everybody.
What about offering gifts? We heard that that's one of the things that occurred with Commissioner McCarty. Do you get offered, when you were on the city council, did you get offered a lot of freebies? No. And then when you did you take them?
Well,
hotel rooms, dinners, lunches.
No, I don't think we were that important.
And this is one problem that I have with the judges is that a lot of these organizations, they're basically lobbyists for the judiciary, and they have their own agenda, and they put on events, and they pay for the judges to attend,
Right.
and they get very influenced by that.
Right.
I mean, I could see it.
Yeah. Well, I think, as I said,
and I have a problem with the same thing with the bar association, even.
Mm-hmm.
But
we were
as
never,
much as you may try and say, well, that's not going to influence me, who's paying for my dinner, who's paying for my hotel room. It sure does.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was really proud of one vote I made, and I won't name the people that were involved, but some people had contributed to my campaign and wanted to build a high-rise in Palm Beach Gardens, and when I was campaigning for the office for the first time, somebody at a forum asked me, what's the worst thing that the City Council in Palm Beach Gardens ever done? And I said it was to build that high-rise. There already was one existing. Mm-hmm. And when it came up for a vote, I voted against it. And they were, I told them beforehand, they come in, meet with staff, meet with some of the council members, explain their project. I said, look, I've said publicly that high-rises do not belong in Palm Beach Gardens. I'm voting against you. Sorry. And they understood it because they knew that was how I was. And I didn't try to deceive them. And I think that's the way you should be as a public official.
We certainly need more people who are going to stand up for their principles and stand up against real estate developers and the like, in big business. Mm-hmm. So let's move on to another area, casinos. That's a big thing going on now. We hear that all these casinos are going to be coming to Florida, and I'm not happy about this either. Mm-hmm. Now, we have the big push with Representative Eric Fresson and Senator Ellen Bogdanoff for the pushing the casinos in Miami-Dade County, and I think this is somewhere right near the AAA arena. Mm-hmm. What's your position on that?
Well, I'm certainly not an expert on it, but what I think is I think the idea of having a proliferation of destination casinos, I don't think is a good idea for the state, and it's not a good idea for a number of reasons.
Well, do you think we could just have one? Don't you think they're like potato chips? We can't just have one. Okay, we're just going to have one, and that's it, or two.
If
I don't think so.
I have to look into what they're doing.
And they're talking about forming a casino control commission. It's like,
right.
That's not for one or two casinos.
My concern is
no way.
There's so many people that could be disadvantaged by it. And not. I don't.
It's
mean
not a
the
good
gamblers.
way of life.
Well,
for
but I
people,
mean,
for
also
children, for families.
You mentioned the Roonies. Pari-mutual operators could wind up, unless they get
they'll go out of business.
They'll go out of business. And the Kennel Club is a very large employer here in Palm Beach County. I think they have 600 people working for them. And in these kind of economic times, we can't. And it's been a staple here for a very, very long time.